What's going on, guys? Vegito here, and I know it's been a while since the last part, and I apologize for that. But when you have a lot of other stories to write, some will unfortunately get put on the back burner, such as the tragic fate of Lavender Town. Which is a shame, since it's one of my first Pokemon stories. So, let's go ahead and continue this one, shall we? But before we get started, I'd like to direct your attention to this analytical stat bar showing that currently 77% of my audience is currently not subscribed. So let's try and fix that so we can reach 4,000 subs before the 2-year anniversary next month. That's June 21st, by the way, for those who don't know. I'd also like to take a quick second to bring to your attention that I have a sister channel where I cover different types of content aside from Pokemon what-ifs, such as what-ifs from other shows. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, the link to that channel is down in the description and up in the iCard. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, where you can get some cool perks such as early access to all of my content, and even channel member exclusive stories. I'll still release these series for non-channel members, just the channel members are getting early access because, well, they're paying for it. You'll also receive a shout out at the end of every video. Now, let's go ahead and get started. We left off after the events of the Indigo League, with Ash finishing in the top 8, while Gary finishes in the top 16. Professor Oak decides to throw a party to celebrate Gary's performance in the league, since he's the only trainer from Pallet to make it to the league, with the other two giving up rather early on. Gary also asks his grandfather if the party can also celebrate Ash's performance, since he did better than him, since Gary's time with Ash, Janine, and Marowak has caused him to be more akin to his Johto self in terms of personality. After the party, Oak asks Gary if he can go to Valencia Island to pick up the GS ball from Professor Ivy, with the Oak Boy agreeing, with Gary asking Ash and Janine if they could go with him. Ash, Gary, and Janine stock up on supplies and pick a few of their Pokemon to take with them to Valencia Island, with Ash taking Marowak, Bulbasaur, Charizard, Gyarados, and Magneton. Gary takes Blastoise, Arcanine, Nidoking, and Scyther. Janine takes Crobat, Venomoth, Nidoqueen, and Vileplume. After a few hours on a crappy blimp that Ash won in a raffle, that was actually a front of Team Rocket. Although Jesse and James didn't know that the blimp was a scheme to get rid of the trio, since Giovanni only maintained the blimp's insurance policy and not its integrity for decades. Ash and Co. arrive on Valencia Island and meet Professor Ivy, with Gary receiving the GS ball. Ash and Co. head back to Pallet Town to get the GS ball to Professor Oak and another blimp, although that one was a trap from Team Rocket as well, as they grab parachutes and jump out of the blimp, leaving our trio and Marowak on a pilotless blimp. Ash catches himself a Lapras as I was beached on an island to increase his team back to 6. A Pokemon watcher named Tracy also joins the group, with Ash and Gary deciding if they're going to be stuck here for the next while, they might as well challenge the Orange League. Now, for the rest of the Orange Islands, I'm going to try me quick. We can get to the meat of the video, being Johto. So for the Orange Islands, I'll only discuss the important events, such as new catches for our quartet, new evolutions, and gym battles for Ash and Gary. Ash and friends arrive on Myken Island, the site of the first Orange League gym, where Ash and Gary challenge Sissy, with the first challenge being a water gun target practice, with Gary having called Oak to ask for his Seadra. Gary is revealed to have a Kingdra in Johto, so who's to say Gary ended up catching it at some point before he met Ash in his timeline, with Gary ordering Seadra to use Water Gun to snipe the targets, before Sissy Seadra. Ash is up next, with Ash deciding to send out his Gyarados, which Sissy remarks as an unconventional choice, since Gyarados can't learn Water Gun, so Ash will have to improvise by using Hydro Pump on the targets. The next competition is a race between water types, with Ash using Lapras and Gary using his own Blastoise against Sissy's Blastoise. Lapras manages to still win like canon, with Blastoise also being able to win, but just barely, allowing Ash and Gary to get their first Orange League badge. Ash and Co. arrive on Mandarin Island, with Marowak for some reason glaring at Ash and attacking our heroes. This is later revealed to be a plot by Biff and Cassidy. Gary catches a Kabuto and sends it to Oaks, so Professor Oak can study it, since I'm sure Oak would want to study some fossil Pokemon. Ash and Co. arrive on Naval Island and challenge Danny, the second Orange League gym leader, with Ash using Lapras to freeze the geyser. Ash calls out Marowak, Bulbasaur, and Charizard for the next leg of the competition, and with Charizard actually obeying him in this timeline, Charizard would be able to get the sled perfectly without spitting flames at Ash. Now Ash chooses Marowak, Bulbasaur, and Clefairy to ride with him in the sled. I also forgot to mention that Ash called his Clefairy from Mr. Fuji, although Marowak would probably slow the sled down a bit, due to him weighing more than a Pikachu. Ash still manages to win, with Marowak activating the unmastered Spectral Flame transformation and using Flamethrower to give the sled a speed boost, since Marowak wouldn't need the mastered form for this. This allows Ash to get the Sea Ruby badge, with Danny allowing Gary to take the challenge the next day. Gary uses Blastoise to freeze the geyser, and Arcanine, Scyther, and Nidoking to carve the sled, with Gary using Scyther, Krabby, and Alakazam to ride in the sled with him. Gary ends up using Scyther to steer, and Alakazam to use Psychic to give the sled a bit of a boost, allowing Gary to get the Sea Ruby badge. It's for this too. Ash catches himself a Snorlax, with him sending Gyarados back to Mr. Fuji to make room for his new catch. Tracy catches an elderly Scyther after Ash fails to catch it. Tracy's Scyther would also end up forming a rivalry with Gary's Scyther. Ash has a battle with Lorelei, a member of the Kanto Elite Four, and although Ash uses Marowak's mastered form of Spectral Flame, it's still not enough to win against Lorelei's Cloyster. This proves to Ash that him and Marowak have a long way to go with Spectral Flame before they can beat a member of the Elite Four. After a few more days of Ash working with Marowak to be able to use the mastered Spectral Flame transformation without any stamina drain, with this entailing Marowak using the form while sparring with Gary's Blastoise. Ash and Co. arrive on Travata Island, with these interactions pretty much going as canon, although Misty isn't present and instead Janine and Gary are here, so Janine would call out Tentacruel and Gary would send out Blastoise to help the little girl caught in a strong current. Ash and Gary both pass the attack test, with Ash using an obedient Charizard in this timeline, and Gary using his Blastoise. Ash and Gary get their gym battles scheduled one after another, with Gary going first, with Gary picking the types of Water, Fire, and Poison. Ash ends up picking Ground, Grass, and Electric. Gary goes first, sending out Nidoking against Rudy's Muck, with Nidoking using Earth Power to make relatively quick work of Muck. Rudy sends out his Starmie next, while Gary sends out Blastoise. Blastoise uses Hydro Pump, although it doesn't really do that much to Starmie. Although Starmie, though, uses Thunderbolt to deal massive damage to Blastoise. Gary orders his starter to get close and use Bite, although this proves futile, since Starmie uses Psychic to hold Blastoise in place and fries it with Thunderbolt, giving Rudy the victory in round 2. Gary and Rudy, now 1 victory apiece, send out their final Pokemon, Arcanine and Ninetales. Gary, knowing that Ninetales' ability can either be Flash Fire or Drought. So Gary, not wanting to take any chances, orders Arcanine to use Extreme Speed to blitz Ninetales, with Rudy ordering his Fox to use Hyper Beam, although Arcanine uses Close Combat to hit Ninetales hard, although this caused his defenses to go down a bit. Ninetales recharges after Hyper Beam, with Gary telling Arcanine to capitalize on this by using Close Combat and finishing Ninetales with a Crunch. This lets Gary get the Spike Shell Badge. Ash then battles Rudy the next day, Ash using Marowak against Rudy's Rhydon. Marowak, sensing that Rhydon is a rather strong opponent, decides to use the unmastered Spectral Flame transformation. Just because Marowak unlocked the mastered form of Spectral Flame doesn't mean that Marowak can't use the unmastered form anymore, since I created its Spectral Flame to be kinda similar to Goku's Ultra Instinct, where he can use both Ultra Instinct Sign and Mastered Ultra Instinct, with Rudy deciding to ask Ash why his Marowak's eyes just turn purple, and what that ghostly looking aura is. Ash explained that it's Marowak's Spectral Flame transformation. Marowak gets into a battle stance and charges up a Shadow Bone, with Rudy ordering Rhydon to finish this quickly with Horn Drill. Although to his surprise, the Horn Drill goes right through Marowak, with Ash pointing out that the power of Spectral Flame allows Marowak to temporarily gain the Ghost typing. And since normal type moves don't affect Ghost Pokemon, that's why Rhydon's attack just phased right through Marowak. Rudy orders his Rhydon to use Rock Slide, although Marowak uses Iron Head, a new move he's been working on to leave Rhydon rather dazed. Marowak can learn Iron Head through TR in Gen 8. This allows Marowak to capitalize on this and finish Rhydon with another Shadow Bone, allowing Ash to win the first round. For round 2, Ash and Rudy send out Magneton and Electabuzz, with Magneton using Flash Cannon to hit Electabuzz. Electabuzz uses a Brick Break to cause super effective damage, with Magneton using another Flash Cannon, with Electabuzz being left close to fainting. Although Electabuzz uses 2 Brick Breaks to knock out Magneton to even the score. Ash and Rudy send out Bulbasaur and Exeggutor, with this battle going as canon, allowing Ash to get his 3rd Orange League badge. Ash and Co. are at Kumquat Island and battle Luana in a double battle, with Ash using Charizard and Marowak against Luana's Alakazam and Marowak, with Marowak and Charizard agreeing that Charizard will fight off Luana's Marowak, while Ash's Marowak deals with Alakazam. Ash's Marowak activates the unmastered Spectral Flame transformation and charges at Alakazam with a Shadow Bone, with this dealing some good damage to Alakazam. Alakazam uses Psychic to send Ash's Marowak back, with Marowak using Shadow Ball and Shadow Bone in a combination, with Alakazam almost getting knocked out by this. Ash tells Marowak it's time to end this and to go all out, with Luana being shocked that Ash and his Marowak were holding back, as Ash's Marowak's body turns black and purple, with Ash's Marowak knocking out Alakazam with one more Shadow Bone, making the battle 2-on-1. The Charizard and Ash's Marowak basically jumping Luana's Marowak at this point, allowing Ash to get his final Orange League badge. Gary has his battle the next day, with Gary using Blastoise and his own Alakazam, with Gary winning his match rather easily, since remember, Gary is stronger than his canon counterpart here. Now our quartet head out to Pumalo Island to challenge the Supreme Gym Leader, Drake. After a couple days, Ash and Co. are at Pumalo Island and challenge Drake, with Ash going first, with Ash using Marowak, Charizard, Bulbasaur, Gyarados, Magneton, and Tauros against Drake's Dragonite, Venusaur, Electabuzz, Onix, Gengar, and Ditto. Drake calls out Ditto first, as Ash calls out Marowak, with Ditto using Transform to transform into Ash's Marowak, with Marowak using Earthquake hit Ditto hard, and using Unmastered Spectral Flame for a split second, manages to knock out Ditto with a Shadow Bone to take Drake to 5. Drake sends out Onix next as Ash calls back Marowak and sends out his trusty Gyarados, with Ash ordering a Dragon Dance to boost Gyarados' attack and speed. Ash then orders Gyarados to go in for an Aqua Tail, hit Onix for super effective damage, while Onix manages to hit a Stone Edge. Gyarados uses one last Aqua Tail to knock out Onix to increase Ash's lead. Drake, having enough of this, sends out Electabuzz next, which makes quick work of Gyarados with a powerful Thunder attack. Ash thinks about sending in Bulbasaur, although he decides to send back in Marowak instead, due to him being immune to Electabuzz's electric attacks. The battle begins, with Drake ordering an Ice Punch to take Marowak down. Although before it connects, Marowak uses Flamethrower to melt the ice, and leave Electabuzz with a burn. Marowak decides to capitalize on this, and goes on the offensive with Earthquake, eventually knocking out Electabuzz, leaving Drake with just 3. The field changes and Drake calls out Venusaur, with Ash deciding to use Tauros, with this battle pretty much going as canon, although Tauros is stronger than its canon counterparts. Drake then sends out his Gengar, with Gengar confusing Tauros, getting Ash to call it back and call his main defense against ghost types, Marowak! Marowak activates Unmastered Spectral Flame and begins to clash with Gengar. Gengar uses the Shadow Ball, although Marowak uses the Shadow Bone to deflect it, with Ash deciding to use Earthquake. With this not really phasing Gengar due to its Levitate ability, Gengar decides to capitalize on this momentary pause and hit Marowak with a powerful Shadow Ball, leaving it rather close to fainting. Marowak then charges in with a Shadow Bone, as his body and skull turn black and purple, with this knocking out Gengar to leave Drake with 1. Although Ash still has 5, Drake decides to call out his last Pokemon, a Dragonite! Ash calls back Marowak for now, and sends out Charizard, with this battle going as canon, although Charizard would put up a better fight, not only due to him being stronger than in canon, but also due to him not being tired from fighting Electabuzz. Ash, now down to 4, decides to call out Magneton next, and while Magneton does put some damage on Dragonite, it quickly gets taken out by a Flamethrower. Ash calls out Bulbasaur next, with Bulbasaur getting completely outclassed and taken out by Dragonite's Ice Beam. Dragonite has taken a lot of damage at this point, with Ash deciding to call back out Tauros, with this battle going as canon, leaving Ash with just his starter. Ash calls out Marowak, as Marowak instantly activates Mastered Spectral Flame, with Marowak using Shadow Ball to hit Dragonite, with Dragonite trying to hit Ice Beam, although Marowak melts it with Flamethrower. Dragonite uses 2 Dragon Claws to hit Marowak, although Marowak ends up blocking one with his bone, with Marowak getting hit by the other. Marowak falls to one knee, using his bone to prop himself up, with Marowak using Shadow Ball to hit Dragonite, causing it to fall out of the sky. Dragonite uses Ice Beam again, Marowak using Flamethrower, and finishes off Dragonite with a Shadow Bone. Marowak stands victorious as he thrusts his bone in the air as a symbol of victory, before he reverts to his base form, unconscious. Drake asks for a couple of days, needs a rest, to make sure his Pokemon are in fighting condition for his battle with Gary. As for Gary's battle, I'll just go ahead and speedrun it, looking into Johto stuff, and not make this video ridiculously long. Nidoking takes out Ditto and Electabuzz, Blastoise takes out Onix and Dragonite, Arcanine takes out Venusaur, and Alakazam takes out Gengar, allowing Gary to win the Orange League as well. Now, the rest of the Orange Islands episodes go as canon, with Ash still releasing Lapras and Gary obtaining an Eevee from Professor Oak. Now, Ash, Janine, and Gary head off to the Johto region, with Tracy staying with Professor Oak as the assistant. Ash calls Mr. Fuji to send Magneton and Snorlax to him, making his current party Marowak, Bulbasaur, Charizard, and Gyarados. After a few days, Ash and Co. arrive in New Bark Town, so Ash and Gary can register for the Johto League. Ash and Co. also stop Team Rocket from stealing Professor Elm's Totodile. Ash and Co. also meet a new trainer named Casey, with this interaction going as canon, with Ash going overkill with Charizard and Marowak, respectively in their two battles. Don't worry, Marowak didn't use Spectral Flame against Casey. Next, Ash and Gary arrive at a massive tree filled with Heracross and Pinsir, with this episode going as canon, with Ash adding Heracross to his team, increasing it to 5 Pokemon. Gary also catches a Pinsir during this time, although it gets sent to Oak's lab. While in Catalia City, Janine catches herself a Spinarak due to her thinking it was really cute, plus she found out from Gary that it's a poison type, which is her specialty. Gary also catches a wild Stantler, mainly to get it some medical treatment, so it would join his team for a while, with Gary sending his Nidoking to Oaks. Ash catches a wild Chikorita to increase his team to 6. Ash and Co. arrive in Cherry Grove City, where they lose the GS Ball to a wild Quagsire, but the trio do manage to get it back. Ash and Co. arrive in Violet City as someone tries to catch Marowak, thinking that he was a wild Pokemon, but he ended up catching a Bellsprout instead. The next day, Ash and Co. arrive at the Violet Gym, with Ash and Gary deciding to play a good old-fashioned game of rock, paper, scissors to determine who will challenge Faulkner first, with Gary winning. Gary uses Blastoise, Nidoqueen, and Arcanine against Faulkner's Hoot Hoot, Dodrio, and Pidgeot. Faulkner calls out Hoot Hoot first, as Gary sends out Arcanine. Arcanine manages to make rather quick work of Hoot Hoot by using Extreme Speed and Fire Blast. Faulkner calls out Dodrio, with Dodrio managing to put up some damage on Arcanine, although Arcanine knocks it out with a Fire Blast, leaving Faulkner with 1. Faulkner calls out Pidgeot, which manages to knock out Arcanine, due to Arcanine being rather tired from after the 2 previous battles. Gary calls out his Blastoise next, with Blastoise managing to knock out Pidgeot with a few Ice Beams, with Gary getting a Zephyr badge. Ash challenges Faulkner the next day, with Ash using Chikorita, Marowak, and Charizard. Chikorita goes versus Hoot Hoot goes as canon, with Marowak coming out and taking out Hoot Hoot with little difficulty. Faulkner's Dodrio comes out, with Marowak using Flamethrower to hit it hard, although Dodrio uses the Tri-Attack to hit Marowak for decent damage. Although Marowak ultimately uses Flamethrower to leave Dodrio with a burn, as Ash calls back Marowak for Charizard. Charizard ends up taking out the weakened Dodrio with Flamethrower, leaving Faulkner with 1, while Ash has 2. Charizard versus Pidgeot ultimately has the same result as Cannon, with Ash getting the Zephyr badge. After a few days, our heroes arrive at Charicific Valley, a place where Charizard can train to get stronger. With this episode going as canon, with Charizard and Marowak having an emotional goodbye, since Marowak saw Charizard as kind of a little brother to him. The next few episodes go as canon, with Ash catching a Cyndaquil, with Marowak deciding to take the Fire Starter under his wing and help it get stronger. While on the way to Azalea Town, Marowak teaches Cyndaquil how to overcome its sluggish battle skills, even helping it power up its Flamethrower. Gary's Arcanine also helped Marowak with this, since Arcanine was the one who taught Marowak Flamethrower in the first place. Ash and Co. arrive at Azalea Town, where they meet Kurt, dropping off the GS ball with him, after helping him stop a drought. Janine also catches herself a wild Pineco, mainly due to her thinking it was cute. Ash and Gary head to the Azalea Town gym and challenge Bugsy, a bug-type specialist, with Ash going first. Mainly due to Gary going first against Faulkner, Bugsy decides to use Spinarak, Metapod, and Scyther. Bugsy calls out Spinarak, while Ash sends out Chikorita. Bugsy questions sending out a grass type against a bug type, and asks Ash why he didn't send out that Marowak of his, since he knows that while Marowak doesn't have a type advantage, it still looks pretty strong. Ultimately, while Chikorita is stronger than in canon due to her rivalry with Marowak, Chikorita versus Spinarak would go as canon. Bugsy ends up sending out Metapod, with Chikorita putting up a better fight than in canon, but ultimately Chikorita gets knocked out. Ash sends out Cyndaquil next, with Cyndaquil having no problem getting started with Flamethrower, or to burn Metapod to a nice crisp, with Bugsy being down to 1. Bugsy calls out Scyther next, with this having the same result as Cyndaquil versus Metapod, with Ash getting the Hive badge to add to his case. Gary's battle is scheduled for the next day. Before heading to the Azalea gym, Gary makes a call to Professor Oak, asking to swap out a couple of Pokemon and for his gym battle with Bugsy. So, Gary sends Nidoqueen and Alakazam back to Oaks in exchange for Fearow and Magmar, mainly to give him the best possible advantage over Bugsy. Gary heads to the Azalea gym and challenges Bugsy, with Gary, Arcanine, Magmar, and Fearow into Bugsy's Spinarak, Metapod, and Scyther. Although with Gary's team, Magmar and Arcanine would just make quick work of Bugsy, with Gary getting his Hive badge. Now, after sending Magmar and Fearow back to Oaks, Ash and Co. get back on the road to Goldenrod City. Also, Ash and Gary managed to get their own Apricorn balls, with Gary getting a Heavy Ball and Ash getting a Lure Ball. Ash and Co. arrive at the Pokemon Swap Meet, with Gary suggesting that maybe Ash should trade his Haunter to get a Gengar. Ash adding his Haunter back to his team and explaining the situation, as a boy with a Machoke comes up to our trio asking if Ash will trade his Haunter for his Machoke, with Ash agreeing as long as it's a trade and trade back. To arrive at a trade machine, the two trading their Pokemon. After this, Ash's Haunter evolves into Gengar, with Ash deciding to call his grandpa and tell him the good news. Mr. Fuji is rather impressed with both Ash and Gary, and the fact that they both got 2 of the Johto gym badges and a Haunter's evolution. Ash ultimately sends Gengar back to Mr. Fuji, and Mr. Fuji agrees to let Heracross stay there as well. While Ash saves a wild Houndour, Gary ultimately catches it, adding it to his team. While Ash and Co. stop for lunch one day, Ash decides to throw his Lure Ball at a wild Wooper, with Ash catching a derpy Pokemon, mainly due to Ash not encountering Totodile on this timeline. Ash still catches his Noctowl, increasing his team to 6, making his team Marowak, Bulbasaur, Chikorita, Cyndaquil, Wooper, and Noctowl. Also forgot to mention that Ash sent Gyarados to Mr. Fuji off screen, so he can have Wooper on the team. Ash and Co. finally arrive in Goldenrod City, with our heroes heading straight to the gym. Obviously after getting their Pokemon healed up, to learn that the gym is closed for the day. Although our trio meets Whitney, the Goldenrod gym leader, while trying to stop Team Rocket from swiping Marowak. Gary ends up facing Whitney first, with Gary using Blastoise, Eevee, and Scyther, as Whitney's Clefairy, Nidorina, and Miltank. As Eevee and Clefairy come out, oh, that's where we'll end things for today. So what did you guys think for this part? What's next for Ash and Marowak? And the mysterious spectral flame power. Now, before we get to the preview of the next What If in the rotation, and the channel member shoutouts, I'd like to say something about the What If rotation, since I seem to be getting a lot of comments asking for What Ifs outside of the rotation. So I'll go ahead and address this real quick. For any What If that isn't in an active What If rotation, those What Ifs are benched until it's time to pick the stories for the next rotation. Since if I did What Ifs that were outside of the rotation, that would just defeat the whole purpose of the What If rotation, which allows me to focus on a few stories at a time. That also means I don't have so many stories at once to work on, with the rotation focusing on 5 at a time. Now, before we get to the preview of the last story of the first What If rotation, I'd like to give a shout out to our channel members. In the base form Vegito tier, we have James Holland. Thanks so much for the support. It really does help the channel out, allowing me to get things like equipment upgrades, such as new microphones, or things to help improve audio quality, since in my honest opinion, audio quality is the most important thing in a What If. Other than having a good idea. Commission artwork, which I plan to start using for the 2-year anniversary special What If Deku and Bakugo were in Pokemon. Which I'll go ahead and show a base design that I made for Deku for this story up on screen. Don't worry, this isn't the final draft of the design. I probably will show the final draft on the community tab once I get it commissioned. Now, on to the preview for the final story of the first What If rotation. Hey guys, Ash here! Wacky and I have some great stuff coming up for this next part, such as my 2nd and 3rd Galar gym battles against Nessie, Nessa, and Kabu. How will our heroes fare in the next leg of their journey? What sort of new friends could Ash, Hop, and Chloe make in this part? Find out in What If Ash Was Born in Galar Part 2. See you guys there.